What in the heck is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Calgary Barbell for yet another episode installment of Form Check Friday. That's what we're doing here. What are we doing here? So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to pull a bunch of viewer submitted videos. We're going to pop them up on the screen behind me. I'm going to make myself a little small in the corner, and then we're going to pick apart people's lifts. We're going to try to help people become more efficient powerlifters by giving a detailed analysis of their lifts and giving them some technical cues, some things to think about, and answering questions when it comes to essentially what we should be thinking about while lifting, some of the different things that we can do to try to become more efficient power lifters. So without any further ado, for anybody who's been watching for a little bit, excuse me, you'll know that what we do in the end of the previous episode is we actually pull up and toss up somebody for the viewers to critique. So last time before I signed off, we put Emile up here, and we're just going to give a quick refresher. He says he's planning to compete next year in powerlifting. He says he's had shoulder issues for a long time, exactly the whole last year. Couldn't bench, only did rehab. Shoulder's better now, but he's always paranoid that he will injure himself again. He's slowly, over the course of months, widened his grip to max grip, feels better than a close grip, and wants to know if we have any tips for him. So I think the biggest thing here is we're just loose on the chest. As you come down, we can see that the bar is wobbling quite a bit. So we make contact about here, and then if we watch the end of the bar, there we go. So if we watch the end of the bar here, we can actually see that it's kind of wobbling around before the press. So we come down again, and during the pause, things are bouncing and moving and wobbling around. So what we need is more leg drive this way, more driving the chest up this way, more pulling the shoulders down, and more control on the chest. We need to have a more controlled touch. So when we're in that pausing sort of phase of the lift where the bar is on the chest, we want to be motionless. We want to be stuck tight, like that bar is just glued to the t-shirt and not wobbling around, not loose, not lackadaisical. There's the word of the day for you. So yeah, we're coming down real fast, which in some cases is a pretty good thing. The bottom position doesn't look terrible, but we're super, almost, I don't want to say lazy, because I don't think you're being lazy. We're just not being as mindful or as tight as we could or should be in that bottom position. So that is my recommendation. I hope that helps you out there, Emile. All right, next up, we have Hannah. Now, so Hannah says she'd like for us to check out her deadlifts. She says she's been having some issues with her SI joint causing pain while loading weight from below. And now that my back and glutes have recovered from the pain, the weight I can pull has unfortunately decreased about 20 pounds. That is totally normal. A lot of times when we run into these pain experiences, we need to deload things. We need to get back to lifting submaximally. And when we do so, that means a lot of the times we are going to be lightening the load. We're going to be lessening the training stimulus. And therefore, we are going to get a little bit weaker, and that is okay. That is totally acceptable. She said she's having her form break down when she adds weight and having a hard time finding that sweet spot with her form again now that she's recovered. Included is 195 for a triple and an attempted 240 for a triple. Cut the third off as it didn't come off the ground. So I think honestly, you probably just need to spend more time training with lighter weights in order to dial in your technique. Now, your technique doesn't look bad in the start, but as soon as we start pulling, there's a lot of things that go wrong, even on the first rep here. So first rep here, shoulders are still a bit elevated. I'd like to see them pulled down a little bit more. And as you come off the floor, big hip rise. Like your hips are shooting up pretty big behind you. Knees are popping back pretty hard. And then the shoulders are rolling forward as a result of not having things pulled perfectly into position, which causes this really sticky sort of phase around the knees. Now, honestly, this is probably well above where I would be training in terms of trying to increase your technical proficiency. Now, yes, there is going to be some pretty stark benefits to training this way in terms of your maximal strength, but I think people need to train both for their strength and for their skills, and I think skill component is kind of being thrown out the window a little bit here. I think with a lighter weight, you could probably execute a little bit better. You could get more reps in and spend time practicing the skill of deadlifting a little bit better. Let's take a look at the other one here where she actually missed a lift. Oh, sorry, that last one was where she missed the lift. This one is actually much better. So I mislabeled these or just downloaded them in the wrong order. This one's actually way better. I would just spend more time training like this. Watch when you lock out that you're not unlocking your knees too much. So right here we're good, and then see how that knees unlock a little bit at the top? When we soften up like that, we can get called for that in competition, so watch out for that. But this weight looks way better to be training with. So just accumulate more volume here. Chances are that the SI joint issues, pain, whatever, was probably from a result of doing too much training that looked like that last video and just, you know, sort of red lighting things a little bit too much, not managing load, stress, fatigue, etc. And those are probably the biggest contributors to injury potential. So let's try to work on that, as well as just spend more time training in that, you know, that sort of like 195 range, because those reps look pretty good. Now we're gonna get into some squats from Charles here. He says he's 21 and he's from Belgium. He's competed in a few meets in the 74 kilo class, wants to improve as much as possible before his next meet. This is 5 reps at about 67% of his training max. Feels like his hips are shooting up a lot out of the bottom position and wants to correct that. Any other things to look at? P.S. We're doing a powerlifting seminar in a few weeks at his powerlifting gym in Leuven. Yes, I will be in Leuven. Really wanted to join, but as a student, it's slightly above budget. Anyways, thank you. Well, I'm glad that we can have this interaction outside of that seminar then, Charles. So let's take a look at this squat. I think that from what I kind of saw in the background while I was reading that, I think that you might be kind of reading a bit too much into this. It does not look to me like your hips are rising too much. If anything, it looks like on the first few reps, you're kind of in a bit of extension, and then as you come up, you start to flatten out. So we see this like shift in torso angle as the chest falls just a tiny bit. So I think a bit of practice with bracing, and actually we'll put annotations up about or a link to a video we did with Liz Craven. This way? I don't know, I always point at the wrong part of the screen, but we did a video with Liz Craven talking about bracing, and I think that would be a really useful thing. It looks like the end of the set, you do a really good job, but these first few reps were kind of overextended, and as we hit the bottom, we're being forced back into a more neutral position, causing a little bit of a shift or feeling of shifting through those first few reps. However, as the set wears on, we get tighter braced, we get a little bit more leaned forward. So I'm just gonna show you here. We've got this torso angle here, and this looks like a good torso angle, whereas when we started, I believe we're a way more upright. We're not as sort of hinged or set into the hips. So what's happening is when we hit the bottom, we're then falling into this pattern because that's our strongest position, is a little bit more leaned forward. Hopefully that makes sense. Alrighty. Who do we have next here? We've got Dylan. Frickin' Dylan, bruh. Dylan. He says he's been working with about 90% of his 1RM, trying to break a plateau of 275 pounds on the bench, wondering if we have any tips for improving his bench. He says he's a big fan of the channel and appreciates the feedback. Well, let's take a look here. Looks like you're a little bit loose on the chest, a little bit heavy on the touch. One thing I always advocate is heavy metal and light touches. So right there, you can see he even sinks it a little bit before he initiates the pause. So we're pretty tight, we're staying pretty big here. And then watch the bar, and we can imagine that the bar is pretty much right on his chest, and right before he goes to press, he sinks and then starts the press with a big jolt. Do you see that? Touch, sink, jolt. Now, not only can that be called, it's called heaving, but it's also going to make for really inconsistent presses. So we can see the bar path on this first one's pretty good. Bar path on the second one's okay. Comes back a little bit far. Another thing I think you could work on is trying to bring that bar out this way a little bit further. Shoulders down a little bit. We also made a video about that. I don't know if Dylan can link 2 videos, but... And that last rep, the butt came up with that aggressive leg drive. If we watch right in here, we see just a split second of daylight. So I would advocate for way more consistency throughout your bench press. I would work on trying to get light touches, control the bar on the chest, press up from a dead stop every time, and use leg drive as a consistent driving force throughout the movement where we're pushing back, enforcing the arch, driving the chest up and pulling the shoulders down throughout the movement from unrack to re-rack, as opposed to if we watch his lower body, we can see him actually sink quite a bit in the lower body and relax as the bar is on his chest. So right here, everything flattens out, and then there's this like big, so right there we're flat. We're in a bit more sort of pressure leg drive wise on the way down, and then during the touch everything flattens out, and then there's this big jolt jump back kind of thing here. Now that's not to say that that kind of thing can't work for a person. It just is a little bit tougher to be consistent with. So for somebody who's a little more intermediate or kind of earlier on in their powerlifting career, I would recommend putting more time and attention into being more consistent throughout their lift and trying to create a more repeatable technique where we're not losing position. We're not like dipping, ducking, dodging, diving, and dodging. Because if you can press a wrench, you can press a ball. I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyways, a little bit more consistency, I think rep to rep could be very productive in terms of advancing. So our next one comes from Cheyenne here. And Cheyenne is doing some deadlifts. So I'm going to pop him up and we'll find his email. He says he's sharing some deadlift files. He's not yet competed, but he's preparing to compete next year. He's been training powerlifting style for about a year and a half. He's really like to know how to improve his deadlift. And one thing he's found and he's working on is to keep the back a little bit more neutral. So this video here is either 82% or 94%. I have two videos here. I'm not sure which one's which. This looks to me like the 82% because he's doing a really good job right in that start position right here. It's just beautiful start position. And you can see there's not a lot of change from start position to the bar leaving the floor. So that tells me, Cheyenne, that you're doing a great job of pulling yourself into position. You can see there's a slight roll in the shoulders where he's pulling his shoulders down and trying to actively depress his shoulder blades and shorten the lever of his torso, right? Because we have the torso here. Basically what we want to try to do is make this as short as possible, because anytime it's longer, it's creating a longer lever arm working against the joint producing the force, which is the hip, throughout a lot of the range of motion anyways. So that to me looks like a really good deadlift, Cheyenne. Let's take a look at the second video I have here and see whether this is the 92 or the 82%. 94, sorry. That's definitely the 82%. Oh. Okay, so we're getting a little bit out of position. We're not quite packed in. I think we're losing a little bit of extension in the low back, which is causing that kind of choppy lockout. So when we come up to here, you're pushing the knees in forward. We're still rounded in the low back, and then you're having to kind of like pull through to extend. Now, I would watch out when you're competing that this doesn't get you an up-down on the bar, or downward motion rather, or that you don't get a hitch for throwing your knees forward under the bar. So if we watch here, one thing I want you to focus on when you're coming through to lockout, your hips shot up a lot more on this rep. So right about here, instead of staying over the bar, what's happening is we're getting this hips shooting up. The knees are locking out pretty early, or close to locking out pretty early. And then we have a whole lot of hip and back extension to go through to get to lockout. So what happens after the bar crosses the knees is you actually start shifting forward again, kind of shifting forward onto the feet, throwing the knees in under the bar a little bit. And that's going to get you into that position where you're kind of ramping it up the thighs, which can be a questionably, potentially called infraction in a powerlifting meet. So I would say that in some ways this looks easier, and in some ways this looks harder than the other one. So I honestly am not even sure which one is the heavier one. This is the other video. Way better job on that that deadlift. So he's also wearing a belt, which I think makes a big difference. So he's doing a bit better job of bracing his low back and his pelvis into position when he starts this rep. still getting that little bit of tendency to kind of push the knees forward under. So I'd watch out for that. Try to keep that pressure back on your heels a little bit as you lock out. And hopefully that helps you, my man. All right. And lastly, we have Thomas. Thomas is going to do some squats here, and I'm going to sign us out, sign us off, whatever you're going to call that. And I want everybody to give some hints, some tips, some pointers to Thomas in the comments section below. Now, if you see anything going wrong here, you can let us know. He says he's hoping to do his first meet soon. Only issue is that he has is when squatting his right rear delt. Thinks there's some rotator cuff issues. It hurts whenever he goes heavy. Sorry, the video is in portrait, but this is 3 at 87%. So let's see if anybody notices or sees anything going on with Thomas's squat and can leave any constructive criticism in the comments below. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you're interested in having your technique looked at for Form Check Friday, go ahead and send your video in to formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Make sure you attach a video. You'd be surprised by how many people send this wonderful, long, detailed email talking about their training history and their goals, and then they forget to attach a video. And that's really unfortunate. So remember to attach your videos, everybody. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. So tune in next week. I'm going to chime in on Thomas's squat, and we'll have some more information for y'all. So have a good weekend, and we'll see everybody very soon. Bye-bye.